In this episode, we're summarizing the 13th episode and season finale of Season 4 of The Wire series titled Final Grades. The episode first aired on December 10th, 2006. In the beginning, Sergeant Jay Landsman enters the Homicide Unit office in a festive mood, but becomes upset seeing new cases on the board. He questions Detective Ed Norris about it, learning that Lester Freeman is behind the increase due to searching the vacant houses. Landsman criticizes Freeman and expresses frustration at the drop in their clearance rate. He then asks Norris about his case involving poisoned narcotics, feeling slightly relieved when Norris mentions having the perpetrator in custody after a voluntary confession. Accompanied by Landsman, Norris returns to the interview room to continue discussing Bubbles' confession. Bubbles, in distress and going through withdrawal, vomits on the detectives. After cleaning up, they find Bubbles attempting to take his own life, but they quickly intervene to save him. After this, Landsman does not charge Bubbles with murder and instead sends him to rehab, where Detective Greggs reaches out to Wallen to help Bubbles. Later on, Freeman gets permission from Daniels and assigns Sidnor and Dozerman to brief the patrol division on the search plan. Greggs asks how she can help, and Freeman suggests she involve Herc, who is suspended at the time. Greggs finds Herc drinking at his home and convinces him to join her by revisiting the site of his recent traffic stop. They fail to find the evidence of the nail gun that he fired from Chris and Snoop's gun, but Herc questions why internal investigations is continuing to probe into his case despite Marimo's transfer and Daniels' leniency for his previous misconduct. Greggs presses him to confess, and he admits that he did falsify paperwork and that he did lose a camera. Greggs and Bunk are left baffled and disappointed, while Herc worries that he is about to lose much more than just his rank as sergeant. In the end, Bunk tells Herc that because he is white, he will be made an example of for the department. At a meeting, Daniels discusses the investigation progress. Bunk and Greggs confirm Herc's identification of the nail gun, but cannot find the nail. Freeman proposes seizing Chris's truck for samples, but Perlman doubts the probable cause. Bunk suggests Randy as a witness, but Freeman sees him only as a source. Bunk promises to provide probable cause soon enough. He pressures Lex's mother, who implicates Chris and possibly Snoop in Lex's murder. Greggs, Freeman, and Bunk stop and search Chris and Snoop with the warrant that they now have. Greggs finds wiring for a hidden compartment and a concealed pistol. They arrest them for weapons possession and later execute a warrant for blood and hair samples. As we catch up with Omar, we see him and his crew divide up the loot they stole from the co-op. Kimmy shares that she is going back into retirement. Butchie asks about the remaining shipment, which Omar says is too much for him to sell alone. Butchie then proposes to Omar that he should sell the drugs back to Proposition Joe. At first, it is seen as a joke, but later on, they end up doing just that. At a meeting of the New Day Co-op, Proposition Joe faces difficulty now that Omar has stolen their narcotics shipment. He suggests paying for a replacement while they recover the stolen drugs. Some members doubt this, insisting that Joe should cover the loss since the drugs were taken while in his group's possession. Joe threatens to withhold future supplies if they persist, and this quiets their objections. Marlo Stanfield questions Joe about the incident, learning it involved Joe's nephew Cheese. Joe offers to protect Cheese and connect Marlo with their supplier to prove Cheese's innocence. Joe then talks with his lieutenant Cheese and Slim about the new plan. They are skeptical about Marlo meeting their supplier, fearing that he will bypass them. When Omar arrives, Cheese and Slim react harshly, but Joe listens to Omar's offer to return the heroin at a discounted rate. Despite Cheese's threats, Joe agrees to the deal. Joe then accompanies Marlo to his meeting with Spiros, where Spiros assures Joe's promise regarding the stolen drugs. After Vandas departs, Marlo directs Monk to monitor Spiros. Monk updates Marlo on Chris and Snoop's arrest, prompting Marlo to instruct him to contact their bondsman. Later on, Dookie heads home and he sees Michael being intimate with a young lady. He tries going to his new high school but ends up ditching school to go visit Mr. Prez. As he enters his school, Dookie brings him a gift and we see he misses being in Mr. Prez's class. The two good things he had were his friends and his middle school, and time has taken that away from him. During the state assessments, Prez is nervous of how his students will perform, but is shocked to later learn that his students actually performed well, quote unquote. Miss Sampson tells him that when he sees a student receive a score of proficient, for example, it indicates that that student is reading 2 grades below the student's grade level. It is called proficiency for political reasons. We see yet another example of how the statistics of the public school systems can be altered through the use of language. Sergeant Ellis Carver struggles to find a suitable place for Randy to stay after the firebombing of Miss Anna's home. Lieutenant Mello shows little sympathy and command that he hand over Randy to DSS. We see Randy appreciates Carver's efforts because he sees firsthand what he has to go through. But he still faces the threat of his new peers who beat him and call him a snitch repeatedly at the group home. They even go as far as drawing the word snitch onto his bed frame for all to see. Cuddy is recovering from the leg injury he received when Monk shot him twice. Colvin stops by to ask Cuddy to help him with Namond, and Cuddy arranges a meeting with Weebay. Colvin then meets with and informs Weebay that Namond needs a different path than the streets that they knew. Weebay hesitates, but after hearing from Colvin that Namond can truly become anything he wants to be, he agrees to consider giving Colvin custody over Namond. In another scene, we see Mayor Garcetti refuses to take the money from the Republican governor because he wishes to run against him in the upcoming election, and he does not want to seem weak. He puts his own political ambitions first instead of the children of Baltimore who need to have their schools properly funded. This greatly disappoints Wilson, and Wilson meets with Coleman Parker to speak about this, and Parker tells him that all politicians disappoint eventually. As we catch up with Pooh, him and Bodie are working near a vacant building where a new body has been recently found. When Bodie learns it is the body of little Kevin, he gets arrested after becoming agitated and breaking a patrol car's windows. McNulty learns from Perlman that 17 bodies have been recovered. He asks her to release Bodie without charges. McNulty then talks to Bodie after his release and offers to buy him lunch. As they leave, Monk notices Bodie getting into McNulty's car. McNulty takes Bodie to a public park where Bodie expresses frustration with his life as a drug dealer under Marlo's leadership. Bodie explains to McNulty that since he was 13, he was involved in the streets, and that he never snitched on anyone else, he never stole from anyone, and he always followed the rules. But that today, that leaves him with nothing, because he has a leader who sees all of those that work for him as expendable pawns. Later on that same night, Marlo orders Chris to take out Bodie, suspecting him of being an informant. Bodie notices he is about to be ambushed, but refuses to flee from his corner despite several warnings and Pooh begging him to run away. Bodie of course refuses, and while Bodie is taking shots at Chris and Snoop, Old Dog walks up behind him and fatally shoots him twice. The following morning, Marlo tasks Michael with taking over Bodie's corner. Later on, Carver informs McNulty of Bodie's death, which pushes McNulty into a panic. McNulty heads over to Pooh's location and questions him about the murder of Bodie. Pooh tells him that he was murdered because he was spotted speaking to McNulty. McNulty then confides in Beatty Russell about his desire to join the investigation, feeling indebted to Bodie. He goes to speak to Daniels about transferring over to the homicide unit, expressing optimism about balancing work and personal life. They speak about their initial conversation when they were on the Barksdale case, and the viewer sees that for McNulty, it is now personal, and he is set on taking down Marlo for what he did to Bodie as we step into season 5. That was episode number 50, titled Final Grades. To watch the next or previous episode summary, click on the link in the description or at the end of this video. If you made it to the end of this video, remember I am summarizing this entire series as well as other popular works of culture like literature, movies, and TV shows. I have the playlists of our summaries in the description. Also, if you found the video to be valuable, share it with a friend and click like so that YouTube can recommend it to other viewers like you. The best way to support this channel is by becoming a Patreon supporter or by buying us a coffee. You will find those links in the description. Doing this helps the channel tremendously. I really thank you for your support.